So I'd like to, first of all, for whoever that doesn't have their camera on, try to turn their camera on. I'd like to see all of you, if at all possible. Turn on and say and wave hi. So Zen teachers have a dilemma, and this dilemma is very real. If we talk about the roadmap to practice, people would be too stuck with the conceptual model of the roadmap that they cannot experience the real practice. If we don't talk about the roadmap, then people have no idea where they're at or where to go. And they can be stuck at the same place for years and years and years and years, never mind 10 years, 20 years, even 30 years. And I've seen this happen throughout my years of Zen practice with all kinds of people that I come across. So in the next little while, I'm going to talk about the roadmap. And word of warning, the purpose of me talking about the roadmap, so that whenever you encounter I call it signpost at the roadmap, you take it out and then you validate, hey, okay, this is where I'm at, this is something that is relevant, and you put the map away after that and you forget about the whole map. Okay. So don't get caught on text, don't get caught on what I'm saying. It's a pointer. Okay. But if I don't talk about this, then people will think, oh, I'm making really good progress with my practice. In essence, they're stuck in one place for 10 years or 20 years. Okay. So why talk about the meditation? Why talk about the jhanas? Why practice the jhanas at all? And jhanas means concentration, means meditation in Pali, and in Sanskrit it means dhyana. Okay, and that's the word for Zen. In Japan and in Vietnam is Ting, and in China is Chen. So what is the jhanas? It's a focused concentration to reduce the mind wandering. We got two types of jhanas, two types of focused concentration. The internal type, where we go inside and focus on our breath. We do the counting to focus the mind on the breath, so as to reduce mind wandering. And once the mind wandering has been able to be drastically reduced, we let go of the counting, and the deepening of the stillness allows our mind, our awareness, to be able to filter out the coarse junk of the five aggregates, the things that you experience when you're sitting still, feeling, sensation, thinking, perceptual, cognition, and personal consciousness, the awareness that's happening. Now, why do we need to sit and do this stuff? Why do we need the jhanas? Why do we need to focus? Why do we need concentration? Why do we need to reduce mind wandering? Well, because it allows us for 5 ways to investigate the hindrances. And the 5 hindrances in Buddhism are, number 1, sensual desire, or moving towards, the energy of moving towards. When you like something, it hovers in front of you and you really have a feeling of attraction to it, that you want to grasp it, reach out and grasp it, right? That's sensual desire. It's craving. And cravings are an unsatisfactory state, because once you get whatever you crave for, It's never satisfying. You crave the next thing. Uh, Ill will is another hindrance or aversion, which means that we move away. Resistance. We move away from something we don't like. So if we had a uncomfortable emotion, we push it away. We suppress it. We distract ourselves. We try to move away from it. And aversion can be experienced in the mild form as irritation, impatience, frustration. In the chronic form as pessimism, pity, miserliness, and anxiety. And in the dramatic form as hatred, seething hatred, and pity, and terror, and jealousy, and aggression. And that's the dramatic form of aversion is ill will. I wish that person was dead, or something like that. The other hindrance, the third hindrance, is sloth and torpor. And a lot of meditators fall into this state thinking that they're resting and their meditation is going very far. Well, sloth and torpor is like this. It's a dullness, it's a sluggish, it's a kind of stiff quality of consciousness. It's kind of like a light boredom and drowsiness. It's that feeling after you had a really big carb dinner. You know what it's like. It's when you had this big carb turkey dinner and you knew you overate and your mind is just dull. Okay, and you want to sleep, but it's so uncomfortable. It may manifest in sleepiness, during meditation. And then there's restlessness and worry. We call it the extreme form of mind wandering, where your mind just goes to the future, goes to the past, has all kinds of anxiety and fears, and it circulates, it obsesses, it judges, it brings up guilt, it brings up remorse, it brings up shame, it brings up, worry about the future, worry about, anxiety about the past. It's very punishing. Restlessness and worry is very punishing. It is one of the hindrance that actually it's usually the cause of hindrance that bring people to meditation. The fifth hindrance is doubt. Now, this is not a good form of doubt. It's distinct from intelligent inquiry. Doubt is lack of faith, unwise skepticism, basically a very closed mind. I just want things my way, okay? And if reality doesn't unfold my way, or people doesn't agree with me, then I don't think so. I'm not going to accept what you say. It's a lack of trust and lack of confidence, not just in the world, but in oneself. Because remember, whatever you are seeing in the world is a reflection of who you are. It's a reflection of yourself, because the mind reflects and creates the world that you are perceiving right now, that you are living in right now. So, the over-intellectualization, the fear of experiencing life is the very cause of this doubt, Instead of actually living life, we like to think about life. And instead of doing, we like to think about doing and avoid doing altogether. And this is probably the form of doubt that we get a lot in, and believe me, Zen practitioners, we're all afflicted by this. So the 5 hindrances are like that. The meditation, the jhanas, allow for the 5 ways to investigate these hindrances. First of all, to know that, are they present? Secondly, to notice that, are they absent? Third, to know why they're arising. Fourth, how do we get rid of them? And fifth, well, what happens when, what do we do that they don't arise in the future? Okay. So the way of non-arising in the future. Now, when practicing to establish the jhanas or the focused concentration, it is enough to see the hindrance and recognize it for what it is, and quickly return to the meditation object, which is your breath or your counting. Actually, it's essential that you need to do that. Don't analyze the hindrance. That's for psychotherapists and psychoanalysts. So what you need to do is examine the hindrance and then realize that it's the hindrance. Let's get back to my meditation. Bring yourself back to the counting, the breath, the breathing, the feeling your body. You're gonna have that focus and the concentration, again. So don't analyze the hindrance, because once you analyze the hindrance, well, guess what you just did? You got into mind wandering. Okay. So now I'm going to talk about the jhanas, the type of concentration practice. And I'm going to divide two types of jhanas. There's the material jhanas, which is the form jhanas, and then there's the formless jhanas, okay? And I'm going to distinguish the two of them very clearly, okay, with the historical text, and also distinguish them with, well, current, science of how this works. So the first four jhanas are called the rupa jhanas, okay? So there are four states of mind of focused concentration. The first one is called access concentration, okay? It's still focused on body and breath and their sensation of the body and the breath. Now, when you first sit down and start counting your breath, guess what happens? Before you get to 10, the mind wanders, right? And then you realize, oops, my mind wandered. I let me get back. Starts counting one again. Huh? And then how long can you count to 10 before your mind wanders again? Well, for any new meditators, they're going to realize very quickly that they don't get to 10 very fast. And even for advanced meditators who haven't focused on the concentration practice, they're going to find that they can't count to 10 or, even for 5 minutes without the mind wandering. Well, guess what? You didn't practice the stillness practice. You didn't practice the concentration practice. The popular thing out there is vipassana, mindfulness per se. And everybody's focused on observing all kinds of stuff, but they don't know how deep they're observing. They don't know how focused is they're observing. They don't know how fast their attention moves, right? It's popular. It works, except that it's not for spirituality. It's great for mental health, okay? If you want to look at spirituality, we're going to talk about focus. And focus is going to be relating to the jhanic states, which is training your mind to be able to focus on a single thing intently and reducing mind wandering to the state of really still, that your mind doesn't wander at all, okay? So we call it access concentration, the first jhana. When the 5 hindrances kind of a little bit disappear, they've lost their grip on you, okay? Only the subtle mental formations and the subtle desire rises a little bit, but it doesn't stop you from focusing on the breath, focusing on the counting. You see with clarity, the counting, the breath, when you let go of the counting, you notice with clarity the breath, and everything just settles. The body just kind of totally relaxes, and all the tightness in your body just calms, and suddenly your breath automatically kind of slows. Okay. And when your mind no longer wanders, okay, no one longer wanders, and then suddenly you have this bubbling feeling of joy that comes out. And for the first time anybody experiences the first jhana, it could be very, very enlightening. They're gonna experience what I call an opening of their entire body sensation to the present. And that opening happens like this. You're going to feel an energetic movement, and then you're going to feel bubbling joy that comes out. And, this is not in, one after another. It could be any way, shape, or form. You could feel not all of these manifestations all at once, or none, or some, or whatever. So many different combinations. But you're going to feel goosebumps. Goosebumps all over your body. And then your hair kind of stands up on end, this energetic movements. All your pores open up, this intense aliveness, which the mind will right away interprets it as fear. So of course, you're sitting in your room, right? There's nothing to fear. Nobody ever dies on the cushion. Right? But your mind will instantly interpret it as fear and tries to avert it, move away from it. But if you have enough access concentration, if you have enough focus and mental concentration, you'll be able to stay with it and move towards it. And when you're able to move towards it, you will sense this immense joy just bubbling up. Okay. And when you focus on the feeling tone of that joy, it's just joy out of nothing. Okay. You're going to sense an overwhelming amount of joy. And some people call it orgasmic, spiritual orgasmic joy. It's quite overwhelming. This happened to me one time. Well, the first time it happened to me was in silent meditation at home. But one time it happened to me during a retreat. Suddenly, in the middle of a retreat, in a room of over 100 people, I started laughing my head off. I just couldn't stop laughing because this bubbly joy came out, and I just focused my attention on it, and it exploded. And I couldn't stop laughing. I just burst out laughing in the middle of a meditation retreat. And I mean, this is not the kind of laugh that, you think, okay, you laugh sometimes. No. This is the kind of laugh that it's an uncontrollable bursting of laugh. It takes over you. And of course, throughout the years, I still have that joy bursting out sometimes. And if you know me long enough, you probably noticed that. So that's the first jhana. And when we experience this, we're gonna like it. We're gonna want it back. And that's the exact way that you're not gonna get it. Because the start of the course, hindrances, the 5 hindrances that I just mentioned, any of those 5 hindrances arising, courses, the kind of very sticky hindrance that arise, any one of those 5 hindrances arising is not going to allow you back into the first jhana. Okay. You have to dispel with those hindrances and be able to focus and still your mind to the point of nothing's moving. The mind's not moving. Okay. And what I mean, the mind not moving, I'm not saying you don't have feelings and you don't have emotions, you don't have all these other stuff, but you're not attached to it. So the 5 aggregates still works. Okay. And after this bubbling joy, what next? the body settles down, and then peace is presented. There's a calmness that comes afterwards. And it's quite easy to go from the first jhana to the second jhana, provided that you don't get too much attached to the joy. And it's hard to not get attached to the joy at first, because for most people, they've never experienced this kind of joy, unabashed joy out of nothing before. I mean, this is unconditional joy. Okay, so yeah, but it's still overwhelming. Pretty much after a while, you realize that this joy is actually not very calming. There's an effect that there's some things there that is not so attractive anymore. So that's when you realize you have to dispense with this joy and investigate further. When you investigate further and let this bubbling joy settle down, you're going to go a little bit deeper, and you're going to hit the second jhana. And in this second jhana, there is this calm, peaceful joy. This is this calm, peaceful pleasure of kind of just still settles down, like a job well done, and you're just so satisfied with what you just did, and not a worry in the world. And when you get to the second jhana, it's like, hey, the world seems okay. There's this feeling of, there's this perception of okayness, and there's this really nice, peaceful enjoyment of okayness. But then after a while, you realize that even in this peaceful enjoyment of okayness, for those of you who are really, really gung-ho about, making a spiritual progress, you stay in this enjoyment of, kind of contentment. You realize that, hey, even this state is unsatisfactory. Why? Because you investigate. Remember, our kind of like practice is observation, right? You investigate and you go, there's something still unsettling about this state. Why? Because it's kind of subtly, still murky, not as clear. And there is somebody enjoying the peaceful joy. That's my conclusion when I was in this jhana anyway. I realized, hey, wait a minute. There's somebody enjoying this peaceful joy. I'm here for no self. This is not where I stop. Keep going. Right? And so, for a lot of practitioner, especially Western Zen practitioner or any form of meditative practice, and you can get here with many different types of meditation practice, not just Zen. For most practitioners, they stay there. They stay at the second jhana, and that's it. Why? Because half an hour a day, an hour a day, you accumulate all of the garbage, and then you got an hour to half an hour to clear it up. And you're in the mode, what I call suffering management. And you know what? It's okay to be in suffering management. I won't judge, because not everybody wants to be in a spiritual practice. Right? It's okay to do it for mental health and to do suffering management. That's totally okay. But then if you're unsatisfied about the suffering management situation, you're going to slowly observe this second jhana, and you realize there's an unsatisfactoriness in it. Why? Because there's a person enjoying the joy and being attached to the joy of even the peacefulness. the peaceful joy. So there's someone there who's still attached to the peaceful joy. So you move to the third jhanas, where the joy disappears. Even the peaceful, subtle joy disappears. So you ask me, what's the point of meditating if I'm going to make my peaceful joy disappear? What am I doing? Turning myself into a rock? Absolutely not. The third jhana is about finding a deeper state of equanimity, of balance, that one realizes that even in joy, there's a discord, there's a disharmony, that the body is still not peaceful enough, still not calm enough. The perception is still not clear enough, and there's a subtle desire to attach to the peace. So eventually, when the joy disappears, there's clarity. There's clarity, intense clarity of mind, of awareness. And it starts to stabilize. This clarity, if you stay in there long enough, it starts to stabilize. And with this clarity and the stabilization, you realize that, hey, even with this stabilization, there is a little bit of desire to want to be in this clarity and stabilization. It's not enough that we abandon joy. Now we're abandoning the peace that is stabilized. What the hell? What are we here for, right? And this is the part where it gets really hard for most practitioners, because let's face it, at the end of it, what's your point of coming to meditative practice? Because you want peace, you want joy, right? And now you've got the peace that is the third jhanas, that is kind of very still and clear. Now you're going to abandon that. And that's when you're going to get to the fourth jhana. The fourth jhana is a form of deeper balance. It's neither pleasurable or unpleasurable. But then, you can remain in this space for quite some time. And during my years of practice, there's times where I stay in this jhanas for a long time in my meditation. And then I realized that, well, as soon as I got off my cushion, walk about life, this jhana didn't help me. It didn't help me at all. When stimulus hits me and I get angry, I get irritated, I flow right into what next? My old conditioned behavior, right? So you can have a lot of peace, a lot of joy, a lot of concentration, focus, getting into this jhanic state, and then what next? As soon as you hit regular life, that's where the shit really hits the fan, right? I spoke to Theravadan monk when I was in Vietnam. I visit my friend, we had the same interests there. So one of my Dharma friends, he drove me to a mountain and visit this Theravadan monk who went to Burma and studied for many years and came back to Vietnam and had a hut in the mountain and was growing his own food and self-sufficient. So he sat there and we had a tea and we discussed, and he said that I had a meditation teacher in Vietnam. Uh, uh, he didn't say who. He said he was so advanced in these jhanic states that he used to be able to enter the fourth jhanas and stay in there for 7 days without moving. By the time he gets out of the jhanas, you can go into his kitchen in his hut and realize that the food had spoiled and grown moldy. And he said, in the beginning, when I was studying the jhanas, I with this teacher, all of us competed to see how long each of us could sit. Yeah? 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, 7 days, like that teacher, to remain in these jhanic states. And then he said one day, I realized I cannot stay with that teacher. And he explained to me, he says, very simple. He can go into the jhanic state for 7 days without moving. But as soon as one of his students or someone, go about displeasuring him when he's not in the jhanic state, he'll grab his teapot and he'll throw at them. He gets these horrible, aversion and anger. And that's all he said to me. He says, I wondered, why the hell do we need to do these jhanic states for if outside of meditation we can have all these hindrances arise at will and not have any control over them? So he said that's when I became disillusioned, and I went to Burma and I studied with a teacher there. U Ten Yin, I think, that teacher that he went to study with. And he said, so you can see that many Buddhist schools are very attached to the jhanic states. We call it the stillness state. But most importantly, we have to do and go further than that. And that brings me to the next part, the Rupa Jhanas, or the formless realm jhanas. Okay? And I'm going to say it straight here, okay? You probably come across this jhanic states in your meditation practice, in a long-term retreat, in, if you sit long enough. My opinion is you won't be able to sustain any of it without Kensho, or to move towards it. The immaterial jhanas are intensely scary to practice, okay? And why do I say intensely scary? Because it opens up and it dissolves the boundaries between you and everything else. In another word, the formless jhanas, the practice of the formless jhanas is the practice of disillusion, breaking down the self, breaking down the boundaries, the psychic boundaries of self. Okay, how much time do I have here? Okay, I'll go on, and if we can't finish, then we'll continue next week. This is quite a big topic. And I'm going to tie this in with Kensho in later talks. So what does the Arupa Jhanas feels like? Okay, so this is me. I divide the two types of jhanas, the form jhanas and the formless jhanas, which is the first 4 jhanas, is the formed jhanas, okay? And then the formless jhanas, this is 5, 6, 7, 8, as the concentration of internal versus external. So internal focus on the breath, focus on the counting, focus on the emotions, feelings, anything that arises internally. That's going to help you practice the first 4 jhanas. Okay? External focus. So when you listen to the sound outside, you expand your awareness as far as you can. You can hear the sound down the street. You can hear the sound down in the basement. You can hear the birds singing outside. And you're able to hear all of that at once. Okay? This is very difficult. It's open awareness. It's not easy to practice. But it's not that hard either. Who here went camping as a kid? Come on, you guys. Come on. We've got to have some life as a kid. Come on. Okay, so a lot of you went camping as a kid. You ever had the, experience of laying on the grass, looking up the stars? Yes, right? Everybody has that experience, right? What did you see? What did you feel? What did you notice at that time? It's breathtaking, right? Suddenly you realize, wow, there's this huge expansiveness, huh? That for a moment you seem really, 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 really small, really tiny, really minuscule, right? Under this huge expansiveness that is the stars and the galaxies, right? And if at that point you're a kid, so you don't know how to dive into that experience. But as a meditator, you can dive into that experience, right? You dive into the feeling of overwhelm, right? The overwhelmed feeling of realizing this vast infinity. Huh? That is, well, named it pretty aptly, the dimension of infinite space. And that's your fifth jhanas, okay? You can practice this during the day. You lay down in the grass, look at the clouds roll by. When the clouds is not there, you notice this vast expanse of sky. Huh? But it's easier to do when you're at night, especially when you see the stars. Well, another way to do it is just, you just lay down on the floor and you imagine, listening to all the things in your room, and then you expand that further, listening to all the things in your house. And you expand that further, listening to the things, in your neighborhood, down the street. And you expand that further, listening to, the whole city. Right? And sometimes in Regina, you can hear the train running like clockwork, right? And I'm not saying, listening as in shifting your attention focus to that sound. I'm saying listening to as open, relax, and listen to everything at once. Okay? And that's how you practice the fifth jhanas. Okay? Not easy to do, not impossible to do. Now, if you practice the fifth jhanas enough, one thing's going to happen. And at this point, if you don't have a teacher, you better get one. And if you don't have someone who you trust, a meditation teacher who you trust, you better get one. Why? Guess what happens when you get into the base of dimension of infinite space? Huh? There's the dissolving of the boundaries of self. It starts to dissolve. And then your ego is going to kick in and go, oh, what's happening? Can't do this. Can't do this. It's fear, fear, fear. This is scary. Run away, run away, run away. So rather than moving towards the fifth jhana, you're going to move away from it. You're going to turn right around, make it like Roadrunner, and run with the dust flying in your back. And you know what? You just run away from one of the most amazing life-changing, liberating experience you could have ever imagined. But nope. Rather than moving towards it, you ran away from it. And this happens a lot with people who practice and don't realize that. I'm sorry, I just inadvertently stopped the recording. Okay, I'm going to stop here because I realized that I won't be able to cover all of the jhanas in one talk. So let's have a discussion. Crystal, could you unmute everybody? Or should we just let people unmute individually and ask questions? Anybody has any questions?
Yeah, if you want to just unmute yourselves, if you're on a phone, you just tap your screen and the little mute button's on the bottom left. Same with on your computers.
Okay, I'll take questions and have a little discussion.
Just a quick observation on what you're talking about in terms of the fifth jhana there, about expanding that awareness out and the concentration and listening and everything. I think one of the problems with that is that for the first four jhanas, you've been focusing on the inside, on one particular thing, on the breath. So it's a very, very singular focus on just one event.
Yes.
Whereas when you then switch over to going into the fifth jhana, it's quite unsettling in the sense that when you start listening outside, your mind automatically latches onto different sounds. It'll latch onto one particular sound, then it'll latch onto another sound. And you think that you're listening to everything, except you're not. What you're actually doing is you're listening to one sound and then going to another sound and then going to another sound. Whereas
that's right. That's right.
What you're doing is allowing all of those sounds to appear in your awareness. So I think that's a very important thing that you pointed out there. It's this focus outside. Focus usually means one thing, whereas this is a very, very open focus. It's almost an unfocus, but the focus is that you mentally you're focused on it, but you're not focused on it. There's sort of those two things sort of not almost, but they do sit together in that state. So very important to understand that there's that almost like the duality sitting there. The focus is on all the sounds outside, not just on one particular one as you move into that.
Yes, that's right. So how I practiced this before was I meditated sitting open eye. I find a spot in the middle and I just look at it. And so I'm used to focusing a singular focus for so long, practicing the first four jhanas. And so I had no problem just focusing on a single spot in the front. And then everything just drops. The mind calms, right? And it stills. And then rather than just focusing on that spot, I start to look at that spot and actually notice the peripheral vision on the side as well, right? So, it takes a while. It takes a little work. And I start to notice the peripheral vision around, rather than that spot that I'm focusing. And while I'm sitting, open eye, okay? And that's one type of practice that you can do with the practicing opening the singular focus to open awareness. And I did this extensively in my backyard and front yard for quite some time, on days, and this helped with opening up the awareness. And it's best done in nature, because nature doesn't bring up all these kind of stimulus distraction that triggers your association with other things that can drag you in your everyday life. Or you can do this looking at a wall. And in most Zen temples, most Zen monasteries, they would teach practitioner to do this while looking at a blank wall. Okay. But mind you, if you don't got the first 4 jhanas right, forget about this fifth. You're not going to be able to go into that open awareness without the mind just taking over. It's not going to happen.
Yeah, I think that's probably also one of the reasons why I think both you and I have been, telling people to be very, very aware how important the counting practice is. I think a lot of people have sort of gone through that just maybe for a few months or something, but it should form the core foundation of your practice. You should try and do it pretty much at every sitting for a few minutes, maybe 10 or 15 minutes as you start, just to bring that focus back or something. So, I mean, I know ages ago you were saying that you'd done the counting practice for about 2 or 3 years or something. So I think people ought to put that into perspective, that this isn't a quick fix, in the sense that you sort of do it for 2 months or 3 months and then you move on. It's a sustained practice. There needs to be that tremendous determination to sit day after day after day and do these things. So
Yes, I did the counting practice for 2 years at an hour each every morning when I first started. So, and even with that, I still visited quite often. So, unless you've got the 4 jhanas and the jhana states down pat, you can't move further than that. But then, you know what? All these stages are arbitrary. It's like I take a road and then I chop it into 4 sections, right? And I call this section is this section is that. Some other people might take that road and chop it into 2 sections, right? Or some people might say, hey, there's no road altogether, we're just walking, right?
no.
So you need to remember that all of this are arbitrary, okay? They're just signposts. Yeah? But if we don't talk about them, you'll be in aversion and not know it. Huh? And then you waste 10 years, 20 years of your practice.
Yeah, that's right.
Thinking you've made progress.
Yeah, well, I mean, again, that's the reason to have the teacher there too, right? Because you can talk about these things, and hopefully the teacher's good enough to, in terms of being able to see that you're stuck, right? Because
Well, you gotta have a love-hate relationship with your teacher, by the way, because you can achieve all these great insights and all these great jhanic states, and you go to the teacher and they go, my teacher would say, keep going.
yeah,
And so, at some one point, I hated my teacher. I was like, what the hell? He doesn't want me to progress. He has no, support of me. He doesn't want me to acknowledge me, that I'm making the progress, right? Of course, you're going to have love and hate with your teacher. Yeah.
I was going to say, I frequently thought that, Harry, when I've spoken with you.
I know. He loves me, he hates me. So you can imagine, this is coming to my 30th year of my Zen practice, which I started very early, mind you, and I was very thick in the head. So it took me 13 years to Kensho. Don't follow my example, by the way. I got all of you guys beat. So I was in the first 10 years of my practice. I was pretty much very attached to words, very attached to books, very attached to methods, very attached to the first 4 jhanas. And at some point, I even thought, my teacher was too ordinary. He's not famous like the other teachers. He's not eloquent like the other teachers. He doesn't fit any of my preconception of what a spiritual master is like. God damn. And when I actually Ken showed and deepened in my practice with him, I realized, oh my God, he's the best thing around that I needed. this this teacher that I've dismissed, for many years, even though I kept, a relationship with him, but I keep thinking he doesn't want my program. He never praises me. Every time I said I attained something, he's like, nah, that's not important. Go. You have a very developed spiritual ego at that point.
Yeah, that's right. It's amazing how quickly the ego jumps in.
Oh yeah. I mean, I've seen that happens to people even after Kensho. Huh? Of course, they find suffering very quickly because after Kensho, your garbage comes out. Then you realize, you got to cling on to the next person that can take you through this storm. So, over the next few weeks, I want to cover in depth, these practices, not so that you have something to look forward to, okay? Just so that you know what these signposts look like. And I advise you, as soon as I finish these lessons, immediately forget about them. Okay? When you need them, take them out. Look at them and then put them back. So this is a map. It's like a map, right? You don't walk on the road with your head glued to the map, because guess what happens? You're gonna hit a post, right? Or you're gonna step into a pothole, right? With your head glued to the map. Matter of fact, you're gonna be lost and not know where you're going at all, or you're going in it, or that you're going anywhere at all, right? With your head glued to the map. The point of the map is to take it out, look at it, put it away so you can be on your way. Okay? It's important to have a map. Don't make the map and don't use the map to hinder you. And that's the dilemma with the Zen teacher. Okay? We're damned if we talk about it. We're damned if we don't. So, but then, we have to talk about it, because if we don't talk about it, everybody be blind of where they're going. But if we talk about it, you'll get stuck and then you won't go anywhere. Because these are all mental stuff, right? So the best thing to do in a Zen monastery is tell them to shut up and look at the wall. Any other questions? So I'm doing a good job. If some of you hate me, some of you resent me.
No, just a comment I'll offer.
Yes?
Yeah, just a comment I'll offer. I just thought that there was a very useful, helpful, and fairly clear description of the four jhanas. It answered a fair amount of, gave me some good guidance and answered a fair number of the questions that I've had for some time on that. So I thank you very much for that. That was a very, very helpful. Very helpful.
Oh, yes, you're very welcome. And if any of you nerds want to talk to me about the psychology and core regula, thing with about the jhanas here and the brain and how psychology works with the jhanas, I'm happy to talk to you, because I'm such a nerd as well. Okay, we have no questions.
Well, maybe could you explain that? What do you mean by the psychology of the brain? Is that just like kind of the mechanics of it all? Because I think that kind of takes the mystery out of it, and like I don't know.
Okay. I'm gonna take the mystery out of the woohoo that's going on in the spiritual supermarket here. Okay, guys, I'm a big skeptic, and that's why I love Zen. Okay. So I have an open mind, but not open enough that the brain falls out. So I've always practiced, and you hear these people talk about the third eye and the Shara chakra and all this stuff. You know what? I didn't care about any of that. I read it, I left it there, I left it on the table, and I investigated. So in the last 10 years, psychology, and especially neuropsychology, had made some huge advances thanks to the scanning machine called fMRI. And what they found is that when people meditate, and they do this internal meditation of the first 4 jhanas, when they focus on the breath, focus on the body, the sensation, the internal, they deactivate what is called the default mode network in the brain. And the default mode network has 3 or 4 brain areas where is responsible for the narrative, the story of your life, the whole feeling of I am, I am this person, I am that. So basically, when you practice the first jhanas, you temporarily suspend all of that. You deactivate that. So that's why mind wandering is reduced. That's why you find this stillness and this openness in the jhanas, in the first 4 jhanas, and seemingly, the peace is there because you basically turn off your chatterbox, right? The default mode network is the chatterbox. So where does those network correlates? Well, first of all, it correlates here, the medial prefrontal cortex. So when you sit and you feel like, oh, my third eye it's kind of tingling, well, guess what happens? Your meditation is turning off that area. That's why you feel that tingling right there, okay? So I just took the mystery out of, the spiritual stuff. I'm sorry. What about the shahara, the feeling on top of your brain, right? Well, guess what? It's the posterior frontal cortex, right? And that part is also, that brain part is somewhere up here. It's also a part of the default mode network. It's one of the 4 brain parts that is part of the default mode network. And once you meditate deep enough, you're gonna start to turn that off as well. And that part processes, guess what? That part processes the cognizance of the past, the future, pulls out the memory processes, and perceptions of past and future. So that's the neural correlates. And with advanced meditators, they've been experimenting on them, and what they found is that they also activate another brain part on the left, first, the front, and it's called the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex. And what that part does is it inhibits, okay? It inhibits what you call the fight and flight responses, and the other neural parts that correlates to motivation, the wanting. Okay, so there's brain parts in you that drives the wanting, that kind of like facilitates the wanting. And in advanced meditators, people who've been meditating skillfully for 10,000 hours or more, what they found is that it activates that part of their brain. So advanced meditators can instantly calm themselves down if they get kind of hyper aroused. So they suppresses the amygdala, which is the fight and flight response in you. Having a functional amygdala is very good, actually, because without an amygdala, you won't have any emotions. Right? And a reduced amygdala is somebody who has psychopathy, so you won't have any deep emotions. Having a good amygdala is good, except that the ability to calm it down, it's a very, very useful ability. Why? Because if you can calm it down, you can do something about it, right? So you got a good and functioning amygdala, which means that you can empathize with the other people or things that you see. But if you don't calm it down, you're going to get into what you call the emotional hijacking. Huh? Then you won't be able to act on what you sense, huh? Or have a good judgment of what you sense. Okay. So, sorry, I took the mystery out of all of the Hindu, like system, chakra system and all that.
Love it.
What?
I said I love it. I mean, that's the stuff I like to hear, because I've experienced some of the things you talked about, and it was like, what? It was scary. It was too scary. But when it's turned into, the mechanics or the science behind it, it for me, I find that so much more helpful than. It's really cool. All that, all fancy, but to me, it's too scary.
So if you got pain, in a certain part of your eye, usually your back of your left eye, or pain in your eye and stuff like that. Well, what your meditation did was activate, hyperactivate the orbital frontal orbital frontal cortex right behind the eye, and that brain itself, it helps to calm down the emotions. So, when you meditate and you get all these weird things happening, talk to me. I'm not a Zen. I'm not only a Zen teacher. I'm a skeptic, and I'm really into science. So I'm pretty sure like 10 years ago, none of these was around, because of course, there's a lot of closet meditators didn't want to admit, closet meditator scientists that didn't want to admit that they're into this stuff. 10 years ago, 20 years ago, if you admit that you're a scientist and a closet meditator, the woo-woo stuff, then your career is probably over. But now it becomes really popular. So in the last 10 years, there's amazing progress in terms of studies of meditation and science. So it's nice to see that we take the mystery out of, thousands and thousands of years of spiritual practice.
So then, Lotus, let's take that just a little bit further then. In speaking about the chakras and the various energy processing centers, when you have these neurophysiological changes taking place in the brain, the central nervous system, how is that translating into peripheral experiences in the body, somatic experiences in certain regions, what we call chakras? Is there relaxation of smooth muscle in the gut, for example, or as a result of disconnecting or deactivating some of these neural centers? Why do we have positive euphoric experiences, or are they endorphins that take place inside the central nervous system? Do you have any insight or any knowledge, research on that kind of area?
It's still being researched. This area is fairly new in terms of, these kind of practices have been around for thousands of years, and it's not actually a popular practice. You're not going to find, the world having tons of mystics walking around. So first of all, we're kind of restricted with, number one, the subjects that they're able to get access to be able to study, right? And number two, yes?
Small sample sizes.
That's right. So, and we know that it's these yogic practice, these meditative practice, the Zen practice is extremely beneficial for people, but you're not going to find too many, I call it athlete meditators to be able to study it. So we're left with beginners, studying beginners right now, and with beginners, you're not going to see much of these stuff.
I guess I would just presume that there must be some sort of physical and neurological, connection between central nervous system and peripheral somatic organs.
It's completely connected. And I can tell you right now, it all comes down and comes back to the brain. Well, and that's what meditation practice is. It is a mental training. It is a brain practice. It is exercising your brain, training it to be more wholesome. You're training your brain to bring more happiness to you. You're training your brain to love other people more. I mean, sorry to say, but when we first got into spiritual practice, it was all me, me, me. But then after a while, you realize you got to learn to love other people more in order for you to actually, feel happier. It's a paradox, but it's true. For all you selfish practitioner out there, be surprised.